When you've spent a few $100s on a cheap projector screen that promises big picture but ends up looking washed out in a living room with a couple of lamps on, the disappointment is real. I've seen that regret too many times, and it makes anyone pause before clicking add to cart. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. The question with the Formovie Cinema Edge 120-inch screen is whether it feels like a smarter buy than those bargain options, or just another pricey promise. First off, this isn't a regular matte white screen. It's an ALR Fresnel surface, which means it's engineered to bounce light back toward the viewer while rejecting ambient light that comes from the sides or ceiling. In a typical family room that isn't a dark home theater, that technology can make a huge difference. I set up a 120-inch version in a room with a couple of recessed ceiling lights and a window with blinds partially closed. The picture stayed punchy, the black stayed deep, and the colors didn't look like they were being washed out by the room's glow. That's a practical win you won't get from a cheap gray-backed screen that simply reflects everything. The screen also includes built-in Dolby audio and DTS-HD speakers. It's not a full-blown sound system, but the integrated speakers give you a decent all-in-one experience if you're not ready to invest in a separate surround setup. I ran a recent sci-fi movie with the speakers at a moderate volume, and the dialogue was clear enough to hear over the bass without turning the projector's volume up. For a first-time home cinema owner who wants decent sound without wiring a separate AV receiver, that's a convenient feature. Now, let's talk about the numbers that matter after you unbox it. The screen is rated for 2100 lumens and a contrast ratio of roughly 3000 to 1. Those figures line up with most ultra-short-throw projectors that sit a few inches from the wall. In practice, the combination of the ALR surface and that brightness level means you can watch movies on a weekday evening without having to black out the entire room. On a bright Saturday afternoon, though, you'll still notice some glare if the sunlight is direct, but it's far less intrusive than on a standard white screen. Who should consider buying the Formovie Cinema Edge? If you have an ultra-short-throw or laser projector in the 3000 lumens range, a living room or dedicated media space that isn't a perfect dark box, and you want a screen that handles a bit of ambient light while also giving you a built-in audio boost, this screen is a solid match. It's also a good fit for gamers who need quick response times and don't want to wrestle with external speakers every time they fire up a console. The 120-inch size hits a sweet spot for most 8-foot walls, giving a cinematic feel without overwhelming the space. Who might want to skip it? If you're a purist who already has a high-end surround sound system and a dedicated home theater room that you can darken completely, you might not need the built-in speakers or the ALR surface. In that case, a traditional acoustic transparent screen could be cheaper and still deliver the picture quality you expect. Also, if you're on a very tight budget, the price point of the Formovie Cinema Edge is higher than a basic white screen, so you'll have to decide whether the extra light rejection and audio justify the spend. One hidden trade-off is the installation process. The screen comes with a sturdy frame and a wall mount kit, but because it's 120 inches, you need to make sure your wall can support the weight and that the mounting points are level. I spent about 20 minutes aligning the frame, and the included guide was clear. But if you're not comfortable with a drill, you might need a friend or a professional. Once it's up, the tensioning system holds the Fresnel surface taut, which is essential for that consistent picture quality. Another practical weakness is that the ALR surface, while great at rejecting side light, can create a slight hot spot if you view the screen from an extreme angle. In a typical sofa screen setup, the hot spot isn't noticeable, but if you have a wider seating arrangement, you might see a small bright patch in the center of the image. That's something you don't get with a plain matte white screen, which spreads light more evenly but also lets more ambient light in. In terms of durability, the screen's frame is coated in a matte black finish that hides fingerprints, and the Fresnel panel is designed to resist scratches. I've moved the screen a couple of times for a different room layout, and the surface held up with no visible marks. The speakers are sealed behind the screen surface, so they're protected from dust, but they also can't be upgraded or swapped out. If you ever want a full-range subwoofer or additional rear channels, you'll need to add external speakers. Overall, the Formovie Cinema Edge feels like a thoughtful answer to a common problem: you want